Now, do you remember this?
You're joking. Not another one? Oh, for God's sake, I can't stand this. There's too much politics going on at the moment. Why does she need to do it?
She says this will produce clarity, it gets things out in the open, sorts things out.
I thought she said that initially when she took over.
Oh, you've got to love Brenda. Brenda in Bristol, that was her reaction when the election was called. And today, can you believe it? It's a year to the day since that snap general election saw the Conservative Party lose its majority in the Commons. Well, Theresa May was able to hold on to power, of course, with the support of the Northern Irish Democratic Unionist Party, but was dramatically weakened as a result. Well, a year on, the defining issue of Theresa May's premiership has, of course, been Brexit. Well, another turbulent day in Westminster yesterday ended with the publication of the so-called backstop proposal, setting out a plan for how the UK will trade with the EU after Brexit if no other agreement can be reached. Well, the proposal would see the UK match EU trade tariffs temporarily in order to avoid a hard Irish border post-Brexit. Well, the UK voted to leave the EU in 2016, of course, and is negotiating the terms on which it will leave the bloc. Well, we're joined now by two political insiders to take a look back on the last year politically and help us understand where on earth we're going with the Brexit negotiations. From the Financial Times, we have Sebastian Payne. We can also speak to the former Labour Party advisor and political commentator, Ayesha Hazarika. Thank you both for coming in. First of all, Boris Johnson, the Foreign Secretary's comments, which have been secretly recorded and released overnight by BuzzFeed. Are either of you surprised by what he said?
Not in the slightest.
Not at all.
Boris being Boris, you know, that really what he said there is what we all know. He thinks Brexit is not going the way he wants it. He'd rather it was going a much tougher direction. He'd probably be quite happy if we'd walked out of talks right now and we're just going towards a no-deal exit from the EU. And he clearly does feel he should be the man in charge. You know, everything we saw in these leaked recordings about the Treasury and how they're acting and how Theresa May should be more like Donald Trump. You know, Boris can obviously see a bit of himself in that there too, but in normal circumstances he would be sacked by now. I can't think of the number of times over the past year Boris has broken cabinet collective responsibility and should have left the government, but he seems to be totally unsackable.
And the reason for that is because Theresa May is so weak. She is incredibly fragile. She has no power base, and she's really there because of Brexit, because there's no contender for the Conservative Party that wants to come in right now when Brexit's such a poison chalice. And if we look back to her very, very misfortunate conference speech where she had that coughing fit and there was somebody who sabotaged it. It was all a sort of disaster from start to finish.
Letters falling off behind her.
I mean, literally, it was like something out of a thick of it sketch. But interestingly, Boris Johnson, even before that conference speech, again, you know, tried to go across her. He pre-released sort of what he would have done in Brexit. And Sebastian's absolutely right. You know, it's Operation Boris. Boris is on manoeuvres, and he knew exactly what he was doing. Whether you're a special advisor in politics, whether you're a senior backbencher, and definitely if you're a cabinet member, there is no such thing as off the record. And when you go into a speech or even a private coffee with a journalist, you know that all your words can be leaked. And so he knew exactly what he was doing.
Chris Mason was saying earlier on, our political correspondent, that he spoke to Liam Fox yesterday, the International Trade Secretary, who said he had threatened to resign to the Prime Minister. Also, we know, of course, the Brexit Secretary, David Davis, had threatened to resign unless they both got their own way. How weak is Theresa May at the moment?
Incredibly. I just think, you know, the Prime Minister, she reminds me of a ping pong ball on top of a water faucet, that she's there, but she never quite goes away, but she could tip over at any moment. One thing I do think, though, is that all these Brexiters continually threaten to resign. David Davis has threatened about 5 times in the past 24 hours to go, and he's still there. Boris Johnson threatened to walk. He's still there. Liam Fox, still there. The fact is, Theresa May says, OK, are you going to blink? Are you going to leave the cabinet and come and challenge me? And they never do. Every single time Theresa May can challenge these people, compromise, soften Brexit just that little bit and she always seems to win. And I think that's the lesson of the past 24 hours, is that Theresa May has still got some authority to just try and soften Brexit, try and push towards getting a deal, and the hardliners, they always let her get away with it.
But that's the point. She's still there, though, isn't she?
She is still there, but that is because why would you want to come in right now when Brexit is such an absolute mess? And one of the problems that the Conservative Party has, even though they have no love or affection for Theresa May, they have not settled on who her successor would be. That is, there's a great battle, and a great battle when she goes, and I suspect she will go after we have some kind of deal on Brexit.
Next summer, I
yes,
think is.
to give her successor time to bed in ahead of a general election against Labour and Jeremy Corbyn. But the problem is the Conservative Party, a bit like the Labour Party had after Ed Miliband left, there will be a battle for the heart and the ideology of the Conservative Party. The modernisers, the Anna Soubrys, the Nicky Morgans, the more kind of socially liberal Conservatives, and the more traditional fiscal and sort of emotional Conservatives as well, the Jacob Rees-Moggs. So there is a big showdown coming up in the Conservative Party. And Seb's right, in a way, the fact that they don't have a successor, the fact that they know if they toppled her now, that could trigger an early general election which could deliver a Jeremy Corbyn-led government. That means that they can noise off, but actually going over the edge, it's quite a big act. That's a big act against not just the Conservative Party, but the country as well.
What's been achieved in the last year?
Nothing. It's been a totally wasted year. Domestically, Brexit, this government has done absolutely nothing. All that the debates we're having now about the customs union, we knew all this last year. We knew this the day we left the EU. I think it's absolutely appalling how little has been done. Domestic legislation, tell me what's been achieved. Yes, the economy's still growing, it's on the road, but on housing, nothing. You know, after Grenfell, what's been done? Very little. I think it's really appalling how, and you could say, yes, Brexit eating everything up and taking up all of the Prime Minister's time, but it really is an abject failure of leadership that on both Brexit and on the things that matter to the country, Theresa May has achieved very little and is just trying to stay on top of events but not actually push or do anything or even make any decisions.
I would say we are in a Brexistential crisis in this country right now. And even though we are all very seized of the, you know, the everyday politics, who's up, who's down, who's threatening to resign, there were big unresolved questions. You know, just this week I was at a conference where people from the science sector, nuclear, pharmaceutical, aviation, and these are not party political people, they're happy to go with whatever the government decides, but they were just saying the uncertainty is doing so much damage to business. They don't know what's happening in terms of you know, what to plan for their future businesses. They've got an issue with skills, you know, how they're going to get the skilled workers here. You know, there are so many big unresolved questions. Meanwhile, we've got this ongoing crisis with the NHS. We don't have enough GPs, nurses. I do feel that Britain is in a very, very big, deep crisis at the moment. Brexit is sucking up all the bandwidth of political commentators such as Sebastian and myself. It's sucking up all the time of civil servants, of special advisors, of government ministers, of the Prime Minister. And we're stuck. We're not moving one way or the other. Politics is in stalemate right now.
I think Ayesha's right. I think one thing we have discovered about Theresa May over the past year, her character is actually very strong. That if you look at all these challenges, all these threats, she could have walked away at any moment. You know, after that conference speech, which you mentioned, which was the most painful hour of my life over the past year.
And no one would have blamed her if she'd gone then.
Totally, but she did stay. She does have a great public service ethic of saying, look, I've got to get my party and my country this really difficult period. But the problem that I have is she just can't make decisions. That, you know, on these crucial questions about the NHS and what have you, it's fudging and fudging and fudging it over and over again to avoid confrontation because she doesn't want to tip her party over. Now, it's a good survival strategy. It's kept her in place. But as you said, Ayesha, I think it's really bad for the country when we face these things. I think one thing that is coming up in early July is the 70th anniversary of the NHS. That's going to be a really big moment where the Prime Minister has got an opportunity to say, we're going to take this forward, give the NHS the money it needs, or will she duck it? We'll find out.
I mean, she should take the view she's on borrowed time, and she should do, if she wants her legacy to survive anything other than being a complete disaster, she should do what's right for the national interest and the country, not just thinking about the rows amongst her backbenchers.
Thank you both ever so much for coming in. Very grateful to you.